I've always hated calculus. Numbers swimming across pages, derivatives mocking me with their complexity, and integrals that might as well be written in ancient hieroglyphics. But on this particular Monday morning at Roosevelt High School in Seattle, I hated something, or rather, someone even more than calculus, Ethan Carter, the impossibly smart and infinitely annoying transfer student who just offered to be my tutor. "Come on, Sarah Mitchell, we both know you need help," he said, leaning against my locker with that irritating half-smile of his. "Mrs. Peterson's midterm is in 2 weeks, and I saw your score on the last quiz." I slammed my locker shut with more force than necessary. "How did you even see my quiz score?" "That's private." "I grade papers for her during study hall," he shrugged, completely unfazed by my glare. "And a 52 isn't exactly what you need to maintain that GPA for Stanford." My cheeks burned. He was right, of course. Stanford had been my dream school since 7th grade, and my early acceptance was conditional on maintaining my grades. One failed calculus midterm could ruin everything I'd worked for. "I don't need your help," I insisted, hitching my backpack higher on my shoulder. "Especially not from someone who's been here barely a month and already acts like he owns the place." Ethan ran a hand through his perpetually messy dark hair, and something about the gesture tugged at a distant memory I couldn't quite grasp. "Look, I'm not trying to show off. I want to help." "Why?" I demanded. "Why me, specifically?" For a moment, something flickered in his hazel eyes, something that looked almost like hurt. But it was gone so quickly I must have imagined it. "Maybe I'm just a nice guy," he said, his trademark smirk returning. "Or maybe I have an ulterior motive. You'll have to accept my help to find out." "Yeah, not happening." I turned to walk away, but his next words stopped me cold. "You still bite your lip when you're trying to solve a hard problem." I spun around. "What did you say?" "Nothing," he replied quickly, but there was something off about his casual tone. "Just an observation. Anyway, offer stands. I'm in the library every day after school until 5. Table by the window, you can't miss it." Before I could respond, he disappeared into the stream of students filling the hallway, leaving me with an unsettled feeling in my stomach and a nagging sense that I was missing something important. "Birth to Sarah." My best friend Rachel's voice snapped me out of my thoughts as she appeared at my side. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Was Ethan bothering you again?" "He offered to tutor me in calculus," I said, still staring after him. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "The new guy?" "Mister, I already took AP Calc at my old school, but let me retake it here to show off." "That's the one." "Well," she linked her arm through mine as we headed to English class, "he is kind of cute, in that mysterious new guy way. And you do need help with calc." "Not you too." I groaned. "He's not cute, he's annoying. He's always raising his hand in class with these long-winded answers, and he has this way of looking at me like he knows something I don't." Rachel gave me a knowing look. "You've spent an awful lot of time noticing things about someone you claim to find annoying." I chose to ignore that comment. "Besides, there's something weird about him. He just said something about how I bite my lip when I'm solving problems." "How would he know that?" "Maybe because you do. Like, all the time. It's kind of your thing." "But he's only been here a month." I protested. "And just now, when he did this thing with his hair." I trailed off, that same nagging feeling returning. "What about it?" "I don't know. It just seemed familiar somehow." I shook my head, trying to clear it. "Never mind. I'm probably just stressed about this midterm." But as we settled into our seats in English class, my mind kept wandering back to Ethan. There was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on, like a word on the tip of my tongue or a dream I couldn't quite remember upon waking. I pulled out my notebook, determined to focus on anything else, but my eyes betrayed me by drifting to the window. From here, I could see the elementary school playground next door, where groups of kids were having their morning recess. A little boy with dark messy hair was helping a girl up after she'd fallen, and suddenly a memory hit me with such force that I gasped out loud. "Miss Mitchell." Mr. Hughes paused in his discussion of The Great Gatsby. "Are you all right?" "Fine," I mumbled, but I wasn't. Because I'd just remembered another little boy with messy dark hair, on another playground, 12 years ago. A boy who'd helped me up when I fell, who'd shared his lunch with me every day for a year, who'd been my first and only elementary school best friend until he moved away without even saying goodbye. But it couldn't be. Could it? The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I kept stealing glances at Ethan during calculus, trying to see traces of that little boy in his features. The way he chewed on his pencil when he was thinking hard, the slight dimple in his left cheek when he smiled. "Miss Mitchell." Mrs. Peterson's voice cut through my thoughts. "Would you like to solve this equation for us?" I looked up at the board, at the mess of numbers and symbols that might as well have been written in another language. My mouth went dry. And then, without thinking, I bit my lip. From 2 rows over, I heard a soft chuckle. When I glanced over, Ethan was watching me with an expression I couldn't read, but there was something softer in it now, something almost wistful. After class, I found myself walking to my locker more slowly than usual, half hoping he would appear again with his annoying smirk and his tutoring offer. But he didn't. Instead, I found a folded piece of paper that had been slipped through the vents. Inside was a crude crayon drawing, clearly old and well worn. It showed 2 stick figures on a playground, a girl with unruly red pigtails and a boy with messy dark hair. At the bottom, in the wobbly handwriting of a 7-year-old, "Sarah and Ethan, best friends forever." My hands trembled as I stared at the drawing. Because I had an identical one, tucked away in a memory box under my bed at home. A drawing I'd made on the last day I ever saw my best friend, before he disappeared from my life without a trace. The bell rang, startling me out of my shock. As students rushed past me to their next classes, I stood frozen, the reality of what I'd just discovered washing over me in waves. Ethan Carter, the annoying transfer student who'd been driving me crazy for the past month, was actually Ethan Walker, the boy who'd been my first best friend, my first crush, and my first heartbreak all rolled into one. And he'd known who I was the entire time. I found him exactly where he said he would be, at the library table by the window, afternoon sunlight streaming across his calculus textbook. For a moment, I just stood there, studying him. How had I not seen it before? The way his eyebrows scrunched together when he concentrated, the restless tapping of his pencil against the table, habits that hadn't changed since we were 7. I slammed the crayon drawing down in front of him. "Explain." Ethan looked up slowly, and for once, that irritating smirk was nowhere to be seen. "I was wondering how long it would take you to figure it out." "Figure it out?" My voice rose enough to earn a sharp shush from the librarian. Lowering it to a fierce whisper, I continued, "You've been here for a month, Ethan. A whole month. You knew exactly who I was, and you didn't say anything." "Sit down, Sarah," he said quietly. When I didn't move, he added, "Please." Something in his tone of vulnerability I'd never heard from the supposedly cocky transfer student made me sink into the chair across from him. "You look exactly the same, you know," he said, his eyes studying my face. "I mean, obviously not exactly the same as when we were 7, but, your freckles. The way you scrunch up your nose when you're angry. Which you're doing right now, by the way." I consciously tried to unscrunch my nose, which only made him smile. "Stop changing the subject. Why didn't you tell me who you were?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that should have given him away weeks ago. "Would you have believed me if I had? Hey, remember me? Your best friend who disappeared without a word 12 years ago. Want to hang out? You could have tried." The hurt I'd buried years ago bubbled to the surface. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Coming to school that Monday and finding out you were just gone. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. Sarah. The pain in his voice matched my own. I wanted to tell you. God, you have no idea how much I wanted to. But my dad, he got the job offer in Chicago on Friday night. By Saturday morning, we were on a plane. Everything happened so fast. You could have written. Called. Something. I did right. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a worn envelope. Every week for months. But they all came back unopened. Apparently, your family moved too, right after we did. I stared at the envelope. It was addressed in childish handwriting to my old house on Maple Street. We'd moved to the other side of Seattle just weeks after Ethan had disappeared. Dad's company had transferred him, and Mom thought a fresh start would be good for me. I was devastated, I admitted quietly. You were my best friend, Ethan. My only real friend back then. And then one day you were just gone. You were mine too. He pushed the envelope across the table. Keep it. There are things in here I wanted to tell you back then. Things a 7-year-old boy couldn't say out loud. My fingers trembled as I picked up the envelope. Why come back now? Why Seattle? Dad got another transfer. When I found out it was back to Seattle, I begged him to let me finish senior year here. Then I saw your name on the class roster. He smiled softly. It felt like fate. So you decided to be completely annoying instead of just telling me the truth. I tried to tell you. That first day in calculus, when I sat next to you and said, "It's been a while." You just rolled your eyes and moved seats. The memory hit me. Ethan's first day, him sliding into the seat next to mine with what I'd interpreted as an arrogant grin, me assuming he was just another overconfident guy trying to hit on me. I thought you were using some cheesy pickup line, I groaned, dropping my head into my hands. His laugh was exactly the same as I remembered. After that, I figured I needed a different approach. I noticed you were struggling with calculus, just like you used to struggle with multiplication tables in 2nd grade. Remember how I used to help you study? Another memory surfaced. Little Ethan patiently creating math games for us during recess, turning multiplication into a competition that somehow made learning fun. The chocolate chip cookie rewards helped, I said, smiling despite myself. You always gave me yours, even when I lost. Because you tried so hard. His eyes met mine. You still do. I've watched you staying late after class, asking for extra help. You're still the same determined girl who wouldn't give up until she mastered her 9 times tables. Something warm unfurled in my chest at his words. And you're still. I trailed off, realizing I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Was he still the same boy who'd been my closest friend? Or was he this new person, the confident, sometimes irritating guy who'd walked back into my life pretending to be a stranger? Still what? He prompted. I don't know, I admitted. I feel like I knew you better when we were 7 than I do now. Then let me help you with calculus, he said softly. Get to know me again. No more pretending, no more games. Just us. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, then back at him. I'm still mad at you. I know. And you're still annoying. A glimmer of his usual smirk returned. Part of my charm. I pulled out my calculus textbook, trying to hide my own smile. Fine. Show me how to do these derivatives. But afterwards, you're going to tell me everything: where you went, what happened, all of it. Deal. He slid his chair closer, and for a moment, I caught a whiff of something familiar, the same mint and sunshine scent I remembered from all those years ago. But first, can we address how you still haven't figured out the chain rule? Shut up, I muttered, but there was no real annoyance in it anymore. Because sitting here with Ethan, watching him scribble equations in the margins of my notebook just like he used to draw stick figures in my multiplication workbook, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: the simple, pure joy of being with someone who knew me before I knew myself. But as the afternoon light faded and Ethan's patient explanations started to make the incomprehensible numbers come clear, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That somewhere between the derivatives and the memories, between the hurt of the past and the confusion of the present, something new was taking shape. The question was, were either of us ready for what that might mean? The next few weeks passed in a blur of calculus formulas and rediscovered memories. Every afternoon in the library, between integration problems and derivative rules, Ethan and I pieced together the 12 years we'd lost. "Remember Mrs. Henderson's class play?" he asked one day, watching me struggle with a particularly nasty integral. "When you got stage fright and refused to come out from behind the curtain?" I groaned at the memory. "Until you crawled back there and told me we could do our lines together, even though you weren't even in that scene. Got us both in trouble," he grinned, "but at least you went on stage." "Yeah," and then promptly threw up on Billy Thompson's shoes. The greatest performance of Little Red Riding Hood in elementary school history. These moments kept catching me off guard: how easily we slipped back into our old friendship, how naturally the memories flowed. But there were new moments too, ones that made my heart beat in unfamiliar patterns. Like when Ethan would lean close to check my work, and I'd catch that mint and sunshine scent that hadn't changed since we were kids. Or when his hand would brush mine as we reached for the same calculator, sending unexpected sparks through my fingers. "You're getting better at this," he said one afternoon, reviewing my practice test. "Mrs. Peterson won't know what hit her." "All thanks to my annoyingly persistent tutor," I teased, but we both knew the joke had lost its edge. These days, annoying felt more like a term of endearment than a complaint. "Speaking of Mrs. Peterson," he hesitated, "she mentioned there's a calculus competition next month at the University of Washington. Teams of 2. We could." "No way," I cut him off. "I'm barely keeping my head above water as it is." "Sarah." The way he said my name made me look up. "You're better than you think you are. You always have been." Before I could respond, a shadow fell across our table. "Well, isn't this cozy?" I looked up to find Madison Carter standing there, her perfectly manicured hands resting on our textbooks. Madison, head cheerleader, queen of the social scene, and my longtime academic rival for valedictorian. "We're studying," I said flatly. "So I see." Her smile was sharp as cut glass. "Funny, I remember when you used to say you'd rather fail than get help from the annoying transfer student. Things change fast, don't they?" I felt Ethan tense beside me. "Do you need something, Madison?" "Just wondering if Sarah's told you about Trevor yet." My blood ran cold. Under the table, my hands clenched into fists. "Trevor?" Ethan's voice was carefully neutral. Madison's smile widened. "Oh, she hasn't." "Sarah, sweetie, you really should tell your new friend about your boyfriend. Especially since he's coming back from his semester abroad next week." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel Ethan's eyes on me, but I couldn't bring myself to meet them. "Anyway," Madison continued sweetly, "just thought you should know. Wouldn't want anyone getting the wrong idea about all these cozy study sessions." She sashayed away, leaving destruction in her wake like a perfectly styled hurricane. "Sarah?" Ethan's voice was quiet. Too quiet. "It's not." I started, then stopped. Because what could I say? That Trevor and I had been dating since sophomore year. That he'd left for a semester in London 4 months ago. That things had been strained and distant even before he left. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it didn't seem relevant to calculus," I tried to joke, but the words fell flat. "Right." Ethan began gathering his books, his movements sharp and precise. "Because we're just studying. Nothing else." "Ethan, wait. No, it's fine. I get it." He stood up, and suddenly he looked like a stranger again, the distant transfer student from that first day. "You should have told me, Sarah. Not because of, whatever this is. But because we're supposed to be friends. We are friends. Are we?" His eyes met mine, and the hurt I saw there made my chest ache. Because friends tell each other important things. Like having boyfriends. Or being someone's childhood best friend. "That's not fair," I whispered. "No, it's not." He shouldered his backpack. "Look, I think you can handle the rest of the practice problems on your own. You've got the basics down now. Please don't do this." For a moment, he hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and silver. "I found this when I was unpacking last week. Thought you might want it back." He set it on the table, a small heart-shaped locket on a delicate chain. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered the day he'd given it to me, our last Valentine's Day together in second grade. Inside was a tiny photo of us at the school carnival, both missing our front teeth and grinning like we knew all the secrets of the universe. "I can't believe you kept it," I said softly. "Yeah, well." He turned away. Maybe some of us are better at holding on to the past than others. I watched him walk away, the afternoon sun casting his shadow long across the library floor. The locket felt heavy in my hand, weighted with memories and missed chances and things left unsaid. My phone buzzed, a text from Trevor: "Can't wait to see you next week. London's been amazing, but I miss you." I stared at the message, then at the locket, feeling caught between past and present, between the girl I was and the girl I was supposed to be. The girl who had everything figured out, perfect grades mostly, perfect boyfriend, perfect plan for the future. But sitting there in the library, surrounded by half-finished calculus problems and the lingering scent of mint and sunshine, I wondered if perfect was what I really wanted after all. Because the truth was, Trevor had been gone for 4 months, and I'd barely noticed. But Ethan had been back in my life for just a few weeks, and already the thought of losing him again felt like a physical pain. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Trevor's return should have felt like everything going back to normal. Instead, from the moment he wrapped me in a hug at the airport, everything felt wrong. "You look different," he said, studying my face with a smile. "Good different. What changed?" What could I say? That I'd rediscovered my childhood best friend? That somewhere between derivatives and shared memories, I'd started feeling things I shouldn't? That I was wearing a silver locket under my sweater that wasn't from him? "Just been studying hard," I said instead. "You know, keeping up those grades for Stanford. That's my girl." He kissed my forehead, and I tried to ignore how foreign it felt. "Oh, speaking of studying, I heard you've been getting help from that new guy. The transfer student." My heart skipped. "Who told you that?" "Madison mentioned it. Said he's some kind of math genius." Trevor's tone was casual, but there was something else underneath it. "She also said you two seem pretty close." "We're just," I started to say, "friends," but the word stuck in my throat. After our confrontation in the library last week, I wasn't sure what Ethan and I were anymore. "It's fine," Trevor laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I trust you. Besides, I have something to tell you that'll make all this better." We were in his car now, driving away from the airport. Seattle's familiar streets passed by in a blur of autumn colors and early Christmas decorations. "I got accepted to University College London for next year." "What?" I turned to stare at him. "For college. Isn't it amazing?" His whole face lit up. "And here's the best part, Stanford has an amazing study abroad program. You could join me there sophomore year. We could explore Europe together, just like we always talked about." The old Sarah would have been thrilled. It was exactly the kind of perfect, planned-out future we'd always discussed. But now, "Trevor," I said slowly, "I haven't even gotten final acceptance to Stanford yet." "But you will. You always get everything you work for. He reached over to squeeze my hand. It's one of the things I love about you. Love. The word hung between us, heavy with expectation. When was the last time we'd said it to each other and really meant it? I need to tell you something, I blurted out. About Ethan. He's not just some random transfer student. He's Sarah. Trevor suddenly slammed on the brakes. Through the windshield, I could see what had caught his attention, Ethan himself, crossing the street ahead of us, carrying what looked like art supplies. That's him, right? Trevor asked. Why don't we give him a ride? I'd love to meet your tutor. Before I could protest, Trevor was rolling down his window. Hey! Need a lift? Ethan turned, and I watched his expression change as he took in the scene, me in the passenger seat, Trevor behind the wheel, his hand still covering mine on the center console. No thanks, Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. I enjoy walking. Come on, man, it's freezing out, Trevor insisted. Least I can do to thank you for helping my girlfriend with calculus. I saw Ethan flinch at the word girlfriend, so slightly I might have imagined it. Really, I'm good. But thanks. His eyes met mine briefly. See you in class, Sarah. We watched him continue down the street, his shoulders rigid under his jacket. Well, he seems intense, Trevor commented. Kind of weird vibe, don't you think? I pulled my hand away from his, suddenly needing space. He's not weird. He's. I took a deep breath. He's Ethan Walker. Trevor's brow furrowed. Walker? Why does that name? His eyes widened. Wait, you're Ethan Walker. The one from elementary school? I nodded. The one you used to talk about all the time when we first started dating? The one who, he stopped, realization dawning. The one you were in love with before he moved away. I was 7, I protested weakly. Sarah. Trevor's voice was quiet. I remember how you talked about him. Even years later, whenever you mentioned him. I used to be jealous of a memory. And now he's back. It's not like that. Isn't it? He pulled into my driveway but didn't turn off the car. Because the Sarah I left 4 months ago would have been thrilled about London. She wouldn't be pulling away when I hold her hand. And she definitely wouldn't be looking at another guy the way you just looked at him. Trevor. Do you still have feelings for him? I don't know, I whispered, and we both knew it was as good as saying yes. Trevor leaned back in his seat, staring straight ahead. You know what's funny? When I was in London, I met someone too. Her name's Alice. Nothing happened, he added quickly. I wouldn't do that to you. But being around her made me realize something wasn't right with us anymore. I just didn't want to admit it. Tears pricked at my eyes, but they were tears of relief more than sadness. How did we get here? By trying too hard to stick to a perfect plan instead of admitting things had changed. He smiled sadly. Maybe we both needed to find someone else to realize that. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Me too. He reached over and wiped a tear from my cheek, a familiar gesture that now felt like goodbye. For what it's worth, I hope he makes you happy. The real you, not the perfect version you've been trying so hard to be. I got out of the car on shaky legs, wondering how a breakup could feel so much like being set free. Sarah. Trevor called before I closed the door. That calculus competition Madison mentioned, you should do it. The old Sarah would have been too scared to try. But maybe this new Sarah is braver than she thinks. As I watched his car disappear down the street, I pulled out my phone. Before I could lose my nerve, I typed out a text to Ethan. Still need a partner for the calculus competition? His reply came almost instantly, depends. Are you done pretending? I touched the locket under my sweater and typed back, no more pretending. I promise. Three dots appeared as he typed his response. I held my breath, waiting to see if some things really did deserve a second chance. The University of Washington's mathematics building was intimidating in the early morning light. As Ethan and I walked up the steps, my hands clutched a stack of notes like a lifeline. We don't have to do this, Ethan said quietly. The Sarah I knew never backed down from a challenge, but if you're not ready. I'm ready. I met his eyes. And I'm not the only one who needs to stop living in the past. The Ethan I knew would never have spent a month pretending to be a stranger. He winced. Fair point. The past 2 weeks had been a crash course in honesty with each other, with ourselves. After that text exchange, we'd met at our old elementary school playground, sitting on the same swings where we'd once shared lunch and dreams. I'd told him about the amicable end with Trevor, about realizing I'd been trying to live a life that looked perfect on paper but felt hollow in reality. He'd told me about the years in Chicago, about convincing his parents to return to Seattle for his senior year when his dad got the transfer offer. I had this whole plan, he'd admitted, pumping his swing slightly. I was going to walk up to you that first day and say something amazingly profound that would make up for 12 years of silence. Instead, you acted like an arrogant jerk, I'd laughed. Because you looked at me like I was a complete stranger. Do you know how much that hurt? About as much as finding out my supposed nemesis was actually my long-lost best friend. We'd spent hours talking, filling in the years we'd missed. About his life in Chicago, my relationship with Trevor, the people we'd become in the time apart. But more importantly, we'd talked about who we wanted to be now. Which led us here to the calculus competition we'd spent every afternoon preparing for, much to Madison's obvious annoyance. Ready to show them what we've got? Ethan asked now, holding the door open. As long as you don't let me throw up on anyone's shoes this time. His laugh echoed in the hallway. One public performance disaster per lifetime is enough. The competition was intense. Team after team tackled complex problems, the kind that made regular calculus look like elementary school math. When our turn came, I felt the familiar panic rising. Then Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand, just like he had during that school play all those years ago. And just like then, his presence made everything else fade away. We worked together seamlessly, his theoretical knowledge combining with my practical approach, years of friendship translating into an uncanny ability to anticipate each other's thoughts. When we hit a particularly difficult problem, I caught myself biting my lip, and heard his soft chuckle beside me. Some things never change, he whispered. Some things do, I whispered back, and felt his hand tighten around mine. We didn't win first place, that went to a team from Lakeside Prep, but our third place finish was more than enough to silence Madison's doubts about my abilities. More importantly, it proved something to ourselves. We make a pretty good team, Ethan said as we left the building, our bronze medals catching the afternoon sun. Always have. Even when one of us is being annoying. I teased. Especially then. He stopped walking, turning to face me. Sarah, about what happens next? You mean the fact that we both got early acceptance letters from Stanford? I smiled at his surprised expression. Yeah, I saw the letter in your backpack last week. You're not the only one who can figure things out, you know. And you're not mad that I applied to your dream school? Mad? Ethan, we spent second grade planning to go to college together. Granted, back then we thought college was a magical place where you got to eat ice cream for dinner and never had bedtime. Which is totally accurate, by the way. But the point is. I took a deep breath. Maybe some dreams are worth holding on to. Even if the path to them isn't exactly what we planned. He reached up, his fingers finding the silver locket that I hadn't taken off since that day in the library. You're wearing it. Of course I am. It reminds me that sometimes the best things in life are the ones that find their way back to you. Sarah Mitchell, he said softly, are you trying to say you still like me? Because that's pretty embarrassing. Shut up, I laughed, but he was already pulling me closer. Make me. So I did, standing on my tiptoes to press my lips to his. And there, with a bronze medal around my neck and my childhood best friend's arms around me, I finally understood something. Sometimes life's greatest moments aren't the ones we plan for, but the ones that surprise us. Sometimes the most perfect things are the ones that start out seeming all wrong. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, the annoying transfer student who offers to tutor you turns out to be exactly who you've been looking for all along. You know, Ethan murmured against my hair, for someone who hates calculus, you're pretty good at figuring out derivatives. Only because I had a good teacher. Yeah. His smile was bright enough to rival the autumn sun. Well, we've got about 8 months until Stanford. Think that's enough time for me to teach you integrals? I pulled him down for another kiss. I think we've got all the time in the world. As we walked hand in hand through the university campus, I thought about the long road that had brought us here, from shared lunches to lost years, from annoying first impressions to rediscovered love. We'd come full circle, in a way, but this wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning of a new equation, one we'd solve together.